Well, good morning. I'm York Kennedy, and it's great to be here. Mercedes, thank you for inviting me. She asked me to come and talk with you guys today about lighting design and specifically about residential lighting design. And I split my time in my career between the performing arts. My father was a history and drama teacher, so I grew up in the theater and went to drama school and conservatories. And then a few years after getting out of there, I was trained in stage design and stage lighting and production. And then a few years out of it, I had worked at Disney in the park in college and right after college. And then after grad school from Yale, a few years out, I had friends who were architects, and they always kept saying, would you ever consider doing some architecture sometime? And this was the mid-90s. So it was a while ago, but I said, I would love to. And I started taking classes at the PG&E Energy Center to get caught up on things and with the IES and AILD and next thing I know, friends just kept throwing me projects. And then that was nice. And then I went to work. I realized it was a time where I had already built a career in the performing arts, working nationally and internationally in theater and opera and some dance. But in architecture, I realized I really need to go to work for a firm that's doing great projects and at least spend some time there, just the way I had done in the performing arts. So I went to work for a firm, Gallegos Lighting Design, that did the Metreon. They've done a bunch of projects in the area, but they also do a lot of international work. And so for 4 years, I did theme parks and museums and restaurants and retail all over the world. And that was great. But then my wife grew up here in Berkeley, and we wanted to have a family, and I wanted to find a way to kind of just slow down and manage my time a little better. And friends kept inviting me. My residential work really came through friends. So it was nice having this commercial work, but I found I had to kind of learn another area by starting to work in residential. And the commercial work and the performing arts really helped me. Working in the performing arts, I was very used to talking about story and to talking with people about the concepts of the space with set designers and production designers. What's the story of the space? What's the story we're trying to tell here? And I found in residential work, so what's the story of the people's lives? Like, what are their tastes? And what do they put on the walls? What do they like in their home? How do they live? How do they use space? That's all the same stuff they do in the performing arts. Like, how are the performers going to use the stage, move around to tell the story? And so that came really naturally, I thought. The tools were very different, but I had learned a lot of the tools from the commercial world. And then I had to learn that in residential, almost all the time, it was icy a lot of the time. And there were other conditions and nuances to it. But I was saying to Saul here that early on, every lighting designer I talked to said, "Oh God, you don't want to do residential. Oh, do you really want to work for homeowners?" What it was I still had this thing in my head. I always liked homes, and I grew up in the South and with my father, and I can still remember at the grocery store that they would have there would be these magazines in the like the free magazines you would pull off as you went out with your bags, and there would be these magazines of home designs, and they were all homes that were 10 times the size of my little house I grew up in the suburbs. But I was always fascinated with the ground plans of them and the look of them, the style, and what people were doing with them. So I guess I always did really love homes, and I was fascinated with how people use space, how they arrange space, how they use it in their lives. And so now, all these years later, it makes sense to me that I've done so many homes. So with that in mind, I just wanted to step through this morning in this presentation and put together some things. All right. So first thing I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the process and workflow of working with a lighting designer and things we have to consider. Or let me go to slideshow first. And reasons to consider working with a lighting designer. And how many of you do your own lighting yourselves? Yeah, and how many of you have collaborated with lighting designers on projects? Great. So obviously, I find it's always just fun to have people to collaborate with versus just myself. So that part of it's a joy. And then also, just like with any specialist in a field, it's wonderful to work with someone who this is what they do. This is what they spend the time in their life doing. And as many of you know, the technology is constantly changing. The codes are constantly changing. But also, I always look back to that. It's just great to have interesting minds in the room. Hopefully the people you work with are interested in this. Well, let me back. Yeah. The collaboration, we talked about the complexities of modern lighting. They also, something Mercedes and I were talking about was decorative fixtures. And it's interesting, being trained as a stage designer and stage lighting designer, we're always looking at period styles and ornamentation, and sort of period is everything for us. So in style, so you get very used to the terminology and the training of what things are. And certainly in commercial and in theme park work and museum work, the lighting designer is often the one specifying the decorative fixtures. And they always have to be coordinated through either the art director and the architect, depending on who's involved with it. But it was just very common for me. I was very used to hunting down decorative fixtures. And I found in residential, the architects often really enjoy that they like us working together on them. They want me to throw some ideas out there. I have learned that it can be a black hole. And so they're both often the most fun thing to do, and they're the most hard to nail down. And so often what I do with contracts is I say, I'll provide 3 or 5 of each of the decorative fixtures. We'll review through those, and then if we need to spend more time on them, then we'll just go to time and hourly, because I've shown 50 chandeliers before on projects, and I want the clients to know most residential projects I've come in contact with, budget is an issue. 1 out of 4 right now that I have, it's not, but it's interesting that my portion is a small piece of a giant thing. But typically it's an issue. So I like for them to know that as soon as we're going to need to spend a lot more time on something, just make sure we allow for that. Also, a qualified, good lighting designer knows how to be with you and lobby for great lighting on the project. And I did a home for a developer, and God, he had developed a ton of giant home projects in Los Angeles, but he was super careful and didn't want complicated technology in his house. But it was a big, it was 5,000 square feet. It was a big house and complicated. And there were some very easy things that we could solve by having whole home controls in it. But he was very nervous about it. But through lobbying it, through showing them where we were not going to use them, he really came around, and we really solved a lot of project problems very easy by being able to do a whole home system. Also, I think you'll get a better result than a lot of architects when they've done some lighting. It's not really their specialty. You guys have to wrestle with a lot more issues in a lot of other fields than I do. And I found it's nice. You get a better result collaborating with a lighting designer than if you dropped in some lights where you think you need them, and then have the electrical contractor go to his distributor and say, I need some down lights and I need some track or whatever. You're going to get a better, more tailored, and I think more artful result by collaborating with them. Some of the objectives is funny. Let me see if I can get this ugly black box. One of the first things I like to know about any project, whether it's $1 billion theme park or a home, is what's the budget. And Mercedes and I have this like regular kind of to and fro about it, because with you guys, like, it needs to be designed before you can budget it. Like, there needs to be some kind of design there. I understand. And there's so many other layers to it. My field is much more easy to budget, I think. And typically, especially in smaller residential, clients they're concerned about cost. They want to know, what's this going to cost me? So they see my fee, but then they're afraid. I mean, they might gulp and say, okay, it's actually not that bad. But but sometimes, they just haven't used consultants and so they'll go, okay, but I really don't want this to be fancy. I really don't want to spend a ton of money on lighting. And I found it's actually pretty easy, especially in residential. Even, God, I did a 6,800 square foot home in Lake Tahoe on the lake. And this guy was downsizing. And that was easy to budget. I know. And had one of those old docks. So he had a dock, like you'll never get one again on Lake Tahoe. But even a house that size, which is not, 6 times the size of my house, it wasn't that hard to budget all the lighting. And then the electrical contractor was already on board. So what we had to do was take the package and say, okay, what are you charging for it? And I've started to learn through experience. I've said no two contractors charge the same, but I sort of know and also I feel comfortable talking with them and saying, I want to make sure you understand, we didn't mean for this cabinet with all these LED strips to be difficult. It's all prepped, and and for the ones I've done in the past, I don't want you to have to spend. I want to protect them. I don't want them to have to just guess at something. So if I've done my work right, I can bring them along with it, and we can spend the money where we really need to on the complicated things on the job, and not them having to just guess. And that comes through good specifications and design. But what's the overall budget range? I can give a budget range for materials for the project, specifically lighting fixtures and dimming controls. My reps tell me the prices. I know what the contractor pays for them. And I know that contractors aren't in business to go out of business. They need to mark it up some. They have storage, they have insurance, liability, all this stuff. So they have to mark it up some and handle it in their office. They're also buying it, so they've got that risk. And I understand that. Every time, as soon as I tell them I know that, the shoulders drop. And they feel better. They know that I'm not just like some hand wavy designer out there that's just throwing tons of stuff at this and not staying in touch with them. Has the project already been filed for permit? Sometimes, not always, and hopefully not very often, but many times I've been brought in on projects where they've already filed, but they've realized, look, we got the architectural cranking. They had to get this fast. They were hired late. So they cranked it out, got it in, got permits, and they did all the basics for it. But they know they want a better result on the project. And they know this client might have a lot of stuff that they need to deal with. So then I get brought in. So I want to know who's doing the permits, who's pulling them, what cities it permitted in, all this stuff. Where's the location? Definitely right away, just like you guys, like what are the scope areas for me? I want to just literally the number of times I've been on projects and we said inside and outside, and they said, yeah, that's it. They don't spend any money outside. And the next thing you know, as we're walking around, the client said, we've always needed to fix this landscaping, and we're redoing this whole long path that leads out. And the next thing you know, and so it's more, so we do a proposal and we take on the landscaping. But it's better up front to ask all these questions. And even as an architect, if you're doing your own lighting, the pathways, really getting, I've been lighting a lot of stuff for people just like me that are aging, and my eyes are aging, and my step lighting is getting brighter. And just really creating good step lights, creating good path lighting, leading places. And now we're in the age, we'll talk about ADUs, but now everybody and their brother, at least in the East Bay, is building an ADU. And so pathway lighting out to the ADU at night is, all of that is important. Yeah.
As an architect, historically, other than the relative price of fixtures, I didn't have a clue about what, if you're going to do a pull-out thing, how that's represented. And, it was always part of the contractors. And a client could choose this price to this price. Yeah. But I mean, you must have thrown the fear of God into some high, medium, and low. Your whole thing's a package. Yeah. And like I said, sometimes things come up, but it's why I just line item every scope area for them so they can see what we're going to touch. And again, I know I'm not dealing with
I just remodeled my home. Oh my God, the decisions you guys have to make. You know, it's like, you know, every fit and finish and every doorknob and every hinge and everything. It's like, and it was amazing fun, but yeah, just, it's easier for me to line item every area we want to touch and what we want to do with it.
Just one note on that, when you were talking, I've understood that, at least in residential, part of the reason we're preparing the budget is to hopefully have something transparent on there, so that for the contractors or subs who will go kind of off the reservation and, you know, overmark something up, there's something as a baseline, so you can say, wait a second, why, that fixture at cost is, whatever,
Yeah,
100,
what's
cost of getting charged at 300, that's way more than 50%.
That's the, thank you.
And
It's-
I haven't really engaged with you on that level. I mean, you've
Yeah.
provided budgets, but I just sort of given them to my client and contractor, haven't done much with them.
I
But,
guess,
but nonetheless,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to see that as a possible tool.
yeah, exactly. And I find commercially, I'm kept on board a whole lot longer than I am residential. And there is this thing, I know a number of you also do commercial, where they package our designs. And so it goes out, the electrical contractor takes it, and then they start getting pricing. And it may or may not be anything I've ever designed. Hopefully, the alternates are the same, but my experience with commercial and with large park projects and museums is they pay me to review the alternates. Residentially, I've had electrical contractors go rogue and say, and forgive me if some of you are, I'm sure we would be good friends, but go rogue and just tell the owner, look, this is all going to cost you a lot of money. I can save you, you know, $5,000, $10,000 right now if we just go to this other product that I use all the time. It's just fine. And this is not anything that the architect and I have spent all this time looking at, tested. We know it dims right. We know it looks beautiful. We know it's got good cutoff, so it's not a glare bomb sitting in the ceiling. And then the next thing I know, like they've subbed or alternates for half or more of my light fixtures. No one ever told me. I do run into that in residential, less than you might think. Not very often. Not very often, which is great. Early on, yet again, it's nice to build a relationship with the architect and the client. I try to always contract with the client directly to them. I work with architects that don't mind me talking to the client, but we don't, you know, I always bring the architect along with any conversations that we're having. But yeah, you can only manage what you know and what you have visibility. But that's why I put it right there that I have allowances for markup. And I truly have had more in museum projects and commercial projects. I had about a $400 light fixture that came in at $1,000. And I was like, come on, guys, come on. I know what this fixture cost and I know what it should cost you. And I told the owner what it should cost them. And it's not hard to track it down. But man, they squeal like crazy when you try to make them show you a line item budget. They package it all well, but it's all a package. I mean, we got you this great price. Yeah, but why is it this price for that fixture that was never going to be that price? You know, it's one of the, I'm sure you guys have many other areas of ugliness in construction. And that's one that's never fun, but it's nice to be able to hold their feet to the fire because I know what that costs versus just steel piping. You know, that can really get away from you.
You guys in New York?
Yeah.
I've been called out by my spouse. So, thank you, Mercedes. I gotta go. I'll call you. Where are you located?
In Berkeley. And yeah, that's nice.
Be in touch very soon.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I get called out all the time. But
You can call me as soon as you can.
okay. So obviously coordinating what software will start to crank through these you're using on the project. If I do 3D stuff, that happens now, and increasingly the young draftsmen are all very comfortable working in 3D. Residentially, everything I ever release is in 2D. It's all that's ever needed. It's typically schematic lighting plans and notes and some detailed drawings. But I definitely, sometimes I need to do 3D work. If I have to work in Revit to keep costs down, I subcontract all of that to a drafting firm that does Revit. And anything almost commercially that I work on these days, I get hit with Revit. And so often we will send our stuff to, and also commercially, most often we do our work and then it goes through an electrical engineer and they package it all into the e-sheets. So I send them CAD and then they just package it all together with it. But residentially, it's great. I really love being able to get some 3D drawings from architects. It's been really great to collaborate with them and show right where things are mounted and how and all that kind of stuff. What I've found is I'm expected to release in 2D to electrical contractors because that's what they're going to build from. And so it's interesting bouncing between themed entertainment, which uses a lot of 3D, and then, but ultimately my work has to be released on electrical plans. Yeah, very good.
How accurate do you think you can, or can you get with representing lighting when CAD? And exactly where you wanted, what you wanted the levels and all that.
Yeah, in terms of placement, deadly specific. You know, I mean, well, unless we all know we run into things in the field.
Is that what you're referring to, like existing conditions?
Well, like for instance, okay, these lights, there's an up thing and a down thing.
Indirect. You know, but I see renderings. Most often, I would say 90% of the time, I'm never asked to do renderings. Certainly residentially, they never want to spend the money for that, even on many million-dollar homes. The architect will do the initial concept of a rendering for the home. The owner buys off on that, and then boom, it's off to the races. And then it's like drawings. And I've definitely done sketches and done presentations, concept presentations, where I'm highlighting where the light is and stuff. But it's the walkthroughs, I've yet to do one where we did walkthroughs when they weren't done after the fact. They were done or on a mega dollar theme park project. The architects took that on, they showed it to us, we gave some input, and then they did the whole walkthrough with a company that does walkthroughs. And God, those are really big projects. But residentially, that's a lot of time. I think it's moving fast. Younger designers are very comfortable with rendering software and
Well, I was just gonna say, in terms of the lighting design process, I've really enjoyed watching, you and other lighting designers really use the technical material that comes to the fixtures and know the beam spread and know the heights and things like that. So that's one of the things I feel more relaxed about when I have a lighting designer, because I know, okay, I know the light's gonna get in there, but is it really gonna get to the light level that we want? And, dimming now is a whole other thing, but, so I think that's really great, because I just never wanted to go and learn all that.
right.
Well, and I think any particular scenario could be, bleh, it's okay, it's lighting or spectacular just because of the way that the light bounces around.
Yeah, what the light is, how it's arranged, what the quality, I talk about this, the quality of the light, whether it's, I love, our wonderful California, like so progressive, and it's like, they've now said 90 CRI or better on all the lighting installed in homes. And that was because these past, the implementation and rollouts of compact fluorescent and others had such bad color quality that people hated the quality of the light, and they noticed it. And they hated it. So all of that really affects us. How the light will render color in the environment is critical. It's critical. And then this last thing on this page is just I always want to know, and often in residential with me, there's really like a preliminary design, a final design, and then we have some time for bids, or we add whatever coordination time that's needed after that, and then construction administration, time in the field. And I always do my construction administration work, time and materials, but I show them how much they should bring me there, how often. I highly suggest they bring a lighting designer on site to check things. And should you log out on me again? There we go. So anyway, construction administration, talking about that. We always need a first review of the design as they're starting the construction with the electrical contractor and the general there to just look over the situation versus the plans, especially in remodel. Otherwise, in new construction, it's often in someone's office where we go over the things. But I love those meeting with the builders. My uncles were all electrical workers and builders. My father was an academic, and I just watching them all argue with each other. It's an important part. I mean, they're going to have to put their hands on it and make it happen. They're going to have to realize it. coordination of the bids and acquisition with the electrical contractors. I know they have relationships with distributors, but it's interesting in residential. I'm having really good luck when I don't have a lot of contact with the distributors, but early on, several distributors, Laner Electric and City Lights in San Francisco, they would call me and say, York, I've got a package here of yours. And I just want to make sure they're ordering all the track, but there's no fittings with it. You know, or they're ordering the track, but no heads. And I mean, it would be weird things like that. And they would just give me a heads up about it. I really appreciated that. And so early on, I'll advocate for good distributors and ones that have experience with quality lighting projects and not just your standard Home Depot off the shelf kind of stuff. Custom fixture coordination. I do many projects where there's a custom light fixture on the job. And they're expensive, time consuming, and you want them done right. And like anything, good time equals often a good result. Is, you know, through really watching it step by step. I've like drawn at the kitchen table with clients a new chandelier based on one they saw in San Francisco and they were in Seattle. And then I went and researched who made that fixture. She was in England. We sent this sketch to her. I sent, you know, all the specs on it, and it arrived in Seattle and we mounted it.
Doesn't it have to get approved by something or other?
By a testing lab?
Yeah.
If it's, well, and at that time, 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago with Seattle, no. And it was all, she did LED drivers and did fiber optic. And it was a decorative fixture. So the driver was rated. And then it was all metal inside the
So
chandelier.
it didn't have-
No.
If it had to be, it'd be different.
Yeah, and I've had it's an excellent point to make is I've had theme park projects where right in the spec, we were told we had to say this, all fixtures must be UL or CL, I believe it was CE listed, CE, yeah, listed. And so, and you have with these parks and Disney and all these, they are huge, so they have a big relationship. And you just design what you need to design. You can imagine these themed lanterns that are made out of iron and need to be disguised for the source, but that's not rolling off the shelf at ylighting.com. You know, it's so there's actually a guy in Germany that's made a lot of stuff for me, and then they would spend, I think it was at the time, $15,000 per fixture type to get the listing on it, the testing lab stamp. But it was not going to go in the parks, and Warner Brothers, same story. That's an excellent point. But anyway, custom fixtures. Adjusting to any issues, especially, and we'll hit remodel in just a minute, but issues, even new construction issues show up. And where they have to do something that wasn't planned. I think it's to what you said, that there's always stuff. It's part of what makes us, we have to think on our feet a little bit. It isn't paint by numbers and draw by numbers at home. And then that's what it should be, walk away and wave your hands. Is then, you know, the living building of something is edgy. There are things happen. And for instance, air handling units suddenly become 3 times the size. And so whole lighting positions are wiped out and they're moving things that are 10-foot air handling. It's important to review all the lighting controls and controls location on site, especially in homes. Homeowners, one thing I found they feel very confident about is that's where I want to touch it to have the lights. You know, and especially if they've lived there before, but even in new construction, I always walk through every single room with the homeowners. And I've even done some where myself and the electrician sat there and with the architect, and we did every outlet. Because I've had homeowners that wanted to hide the cubes. The husband was, you know, oh my God, if I never see a 12-volt transformer again in my life, we will be successful. You know, and so it was all about hiding cubes. And so where did we put outlets to hide the power transfer? But coordinating all that takes time. Then later after the project's being built, things are turned on. And it's not finished, but the walls are finished and they've started to put up some art and things like that. Sometimes even the art isn't up on the walls, but we can rough stuff in. All the focusable and adjustable lighting needs to be dealt with. And that'll show up also in construction administration. And just letting the clients know that there's going to be more time down the road where we need to touch this stuff. And the electricians should be the ones touching it, and I'll direct the focus. versus they think I'm just gonna come run around.
So when you're going, walking through the site and you say, I want the light switch here and the outlet there. You have a little cardboard thing that you staple to the stud and, do something like that so the electrician knows, exactly where to put it.
Yeah, interiors, we've often stapled Post-its and things on there saying, you know, A1, if that's the fixture. First of all, I'm fanatical about every different kind of fixture has a type, a label on it. And not just F1, F2, F3, but like DF or downlights, fixed focus, downlights adjustable. So DA1, DA2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, there's many, and if the beam changes, even if it's the same fixture, if the beam changes, that's a different fixture.
And you always do, you'll have a code coordination to reference.
And that's
You ever
exactly,
put
exactly.
a little snapshot image of the switch or the fixture, the outlet, right on the wall there on the stud, so that there's absolutely no confusion about what there.
No, I haven't done that, but I've seen electricians like take you'll see some of my cut sheets here, take my cut sheets all apart and like Xerox them and staple them around and stuff. And I've seen them tape them on boxes. And then also I just bought a whole bunch of Juno fixtures for my house. And I love that on my order from Acuity, they had A1, 9. So in that box had 9 of that fixture type. They were already speaking the language, the contractors. That's what you want. Programming, so increasingly, there's some kind of programming that has to be done with the lighting system once it's done, unless it's just a localized control of just standard dimmers in rooms throughout the house. Anything more complex than that, there's some programming. And honestly, I think I've converted Mercedes. I've shown it. Yeah, you take your iPhone, you download the app, you sync it to it, and it can be as quick and easy as some of that. And then it can also get really complex. So, but any sort of the smaller system I'm going to show you, Caseta, is not very hard to program at all. But you want your contractor doing that and your lighting designer. As soon as the houses get 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square feet, there tends to be a larger lighting control system and whole home control system. And that's when we have systems integrators. And right away, one of the first questions I ask on those big homes is, who's the systems integrator? Don't have one, really? You know, you really have to get some, because the networking of the different systems. I'm doing a home here in Berkeley, a huge home up in the hills, and my portion is actually entertainment, a 2,000 square foot entertainment room. But there's another line designer who's fantastic, love his work. He's done the whole rest of the home, all the other areas. And there's a Lutron Homework system as part of it, but it's also going to trigger our entertainment lighting system that's in the entertainment room. But it's going to trigger it via different kinds of code. And so the triage of the different companies doing different things. And then I'm using their Homeworks button stations that will then trigger our processor to trigger lighting looks in the entertainment room. And the systems integration company, they're right there on all that. They've already got it. They designed the rack. They know where each of us is in the rack, what kind of power to provide, all of that. So makes me sleep better at night as soon as I hear they're on board. And final review and sign off on all this, of course. There are a number of, in terms of where to look for light fixtures. Often I'm asked, so where do you learn about these fixtures? Where do you find them out? Well, my lighting reps are the first way, just like you guys that represent as product reps call on me. And used to be they would leave binders and we had the whole wall full of binders. And then I remember when it got to be, I'd rather you just go to the website and then because that's the latest information. But my reps, I still call them all the time saying, I've got this difficult situation where I've got to have X amount of fixtures by a certain time. And of course I've been hired late. And they can say, all right, let me see what I can do. Well, I can't get these, but I can get these, or I can get these, but not those. They're great. So they're critical in my life, the lighting representatives, but also in terms of showrooms where I can send clients to look at things. There was ylighting.com, which got bought by lumens.com. And they're now critical. They merged in just this other large company, and now they're huge. Lumens used to not be that interesting. Now they're everything Y had and more. And I find those companies just so valuable. I make, for every project, I make a, especially primarily residential, I make a list. And I can share those favorites for that project to a client. And they can go right on there and step through everything I was thinking of. They can see the price of it, everything else right there. I don't work like interior designers where I buy the light fixtures that are decorative and supply them to owners and I mark them up. And I'm not sure I really know a lighting designer that does. It just goes way back to a conflict of interest. And I think in the lighting profession, they just believe that I'm not going to advocate the best light for my client if I'm also making a cut on it. And so that's just, and I don't want that. I don't want sales, you know, as yet another task. But these companies are great, Lightology. A showroom in San Francisco that I love, and God, they're growing so fast. They just moved into a whole large, huge new space, is City Lights. And Tina Jones is one of the owners there. And I can't recommend those guys enough. They have all your standards, Halo, Juno, all that kind of stuff. And then they have tech lighting. They keep hundreds of fixtures on the shelves stocked. So you can, most of the time, unless you're doing something really big, they can take care of you right away or really fast. So, and
For these big projects. like
Yeah,
you said,
it's
designers
that-
that- And they're really good and their showroom is huge now. It's great to be able to go and see a lot of light fixtures on the floor. And there were a whole bunch of homeowners wandering around. I was impressed.
Yeah, and interior designers I've run into there, also architects. Anyway, they're great and they watch out for your designs too. The stuff they catch is great. And if something didn't work, we do run into eccentricities with dimming occasionally where something just isn't dimming right and everything about it on paper said it would. They're great with working with me. It happens. Also, Visual Comfort used to be circa.com, or they were a showroom in San Francisco, really more high-end, beautiful decorative fixtures, really interesting products. They merged and become a company, Visual Comfort. So some lighting plans.
You're doing well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's biggest concerns. So this is an example of like my first sheet, you know, L0, just showing symbols, notes about it, the basics of Title 24, and a sheet list on it. And then scrolling down, this is was a remodel, so I'm showing the original plan there, and then what we did to it here. And something I'll talk about a little bit more later also, but in terms of thinking about lighting controls in residential, there's localized controls, which is the old way we did it, which is like a dimmer or a switch in each room, done. That's what it is. And you go from the panel to that switch, from that switch up to the light in the ceiling, call it day. Then there's hybrid solutions that have been around for 20 plus years now, where I bet many of you remember the old Lutron, not C-Touch, but graphic eyes, where it was 6 dimmers in a row in a 4-game box. And so versus, I call it the bad restaurant syndrome, where you just see rows of dimmers lined up along the wall. And they go into the room and it's like switch, 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 adjust. Oh, that's very nice. You know, set the ambience. Yes. Oh, it's awful. Well, 20 plus years ago, Lutron, which is a fantastic company, I get no kickbacks, but they just are super reliable. They made a device, the graphic eyes, that we all used a ton of. And that was, so in your dining room or in a living room where you had some base down lighting, you had a nice, beautiful chandelier in the center of the room. You had some or you had some decorative lights or some lights that lit art on the walls. That's 3 layers. Then you had a bookcase that had some lighting in it. That's 4 dimmers or more. Suddenly you could start to have 5, 6, 7 dimmers in a room. Well, no one wants to go over to the wall and go bing, 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 and then start remembering where you set levels. So the graphic eyes basically put 6 dimmers in each box in a 4-gang, call it a day. And you could put as many graphic eyes as you want. You could link them together and you could feed them off to just a single preset button station, which was great. This was 20 plus years ago. Yeah.
Control the lights in a small residence. My own personal experience, a few years ago, I decided to experiment with some the switches for lights and outlets, okay, that are Wi-Fi controlled, that you can get at from your computer or your iPad or your phone or whatever.
Right.
And I used, for that, company called, product called iDevices, which is by Hubble.
Right.
And now, and they're Wi-Fi connected, and now none of them work.
Oh, gosh.
And the switches work, they're fine,
Yeah.
it's just that the Wi-Fi connection, you know, the software evolves and change your Wi-Fi, upgrade your operating system, you know, all these figures.
You know what? It's, you know, it's a valid question to ask. Or did you change your internet service? So you changed it everywhere, but you didn't set up the same Wi-Fi name again.
So, just to continue briefly, so, you know, the project I'm working on now, this is a natural question you ask the homeowners, okay? Do you want to have special ability to control certain things in certain rooms remotely, you know, using your Wi-Fi system or something like that? And so my question is, given the different kinds of products out there, the different companies that are making these products, okay? Are there some that in your experience, you say, don't go near that one, this one works really good?
Yeah. Yes, there are. At the risk of liability, I don't want to say who I really will stay away from.
Rogue electricians, or rogue architects.
But I, you know, what it is it's why I get really conservative about, especially my controls, but also light fixtures. And I'm a slow adapter on change with that stuff. So while some of this stuff is going to sound like real high tech, I know some pitfalls about it, but I also know the wonders of what it can do. And some of it will involve Wi-Fi that we'll look at here in just a second. But yeah, thank you for that. It's really good for me to know. And Hubble's an enormous company. So, you know, even Philips and Hubble make mistakes.
If you bought
NG.
2 years ago, you did really well.
Yeah, and GE, which there's some amazing products by GE, and there's some not good. So anyway, this is just showing the third kind of control layout that we often do. It now increasingly is distributed, where the lighting controls are actually centralized in one place, and then all the loads are scattered about, and then they go to the one location for the dimmers. And for me, it was really new for residential when they started working this way, except for high-end residential is like really enormous homes have been going to centralized lighting racks, just like commercial for many, many, many years now. Commercial has been doing that, God knows how long, with centralized Lutron dimming racks. And then you go to processor and out to button stations. Well, that's now in residential. It's been here for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And HomeWorks was the big behemoth by Lutron that did all the big homes, but there were no solutions in small to mid-sized homes, really, for that. Then Lutron introduced Radio Ra and Radio Ra 2, and that took care of kind of the mid-sized homes, but there were no solutions for small-sized homes. And I'll show you what this can do and benefit from by using some Wi-Fi devices. And there's some best practices when using Wi-Fi that we'll talk about. This is an example that became pretty much centralized dimming and distributed preset stations around the
Can you
house.
explain what centralized dimming is?
It is. What it is you choose the garage, or you choose a closet, or you choose a storage room somewhere. And all of your dimmers, they're not in every room by the wall, the real dimmer that's controlling that light. It's centralized in one place. And you can get racks of dimmers, or you can make your own kind of racks of dimmers by installing 3-gang.
How do you dim it then when you're in the room and you want to dim it?
Exactly. So what you do is the advantage, I know, and I'll get to that, I promise, is the advantage of this is, so all your loads just feed back to this one location where these dimmers are. But then those dimmers are identified with a processor that's networked to them and through wire and Wi-Fi. And that processor, which is most of the time about this big, the giant homes, the processor is much bigger. But really in small to mid-sized homes now, the processor has gotten to be this size. How many of you have Apple TV? Anybody? Oh God, I love my Apple TV. It's literally about this big. It's such a small device and doesn't, take up a lot of space. They're extremely reliable. They've now been tested through a number of generations. And that processor, all of the dimmers see it. And then also on that network, all of the button stations throughout the house are wired. So they're wired into a hub, and then that's on the network so that you can assign any dimmer to any button station or any group of dimmers to any button station in the house.
We'll discuss what the button station is.
Yeah, it literally is, and on down the road, there were some, images of some. But it's literally a wall station that has, you can get them with 2 buttons, you can get them with 4 or 6 buttons, and at the bottom, raise and lower.
It's like a proxy for a switch.
Yes, it is, only it's a better switch because think instead of just on and off and raise and lower, you've got looks. So in the case of a living room, you've got the big bright look, then you've got the like down and cozy when you're gonna watch a movie. That's 2 looks already. And you might want something in between, like for a cocktail party or friends are over or something. So versus going over to the wall and raising and lowering and doing all this, not fun stuff. You just press, top button is the bright. I tend to go high, medium, low looks. And often I'm doing 4. I actually did 4 in my home, and the bottom one. 5th button is all off, shut down. And there's also a little raise and lower at the bottom. And so you can touch the high look, and that's the big bright look. In our kitchen, I call that the mopping up look in the kitchen. Versus like the regular cooking at night in the kitchen and having fun is the medium look. And like the cozy look, because we can see into our kitchen, is the 3rd button down. And that's the one where you go and have dinner, but you still want to be glowing some things and you want your under cabinets on. And people might be going in and out of it. And so that's a 3rd look right there. Can you imagine going over to the wall and readjusting things all the time for everything? It's just not fun, and you don't have to do that.
Oh, okay, you're talking about this panel with the thing at the top and
Yeah,
is it this big or? is this-
it's a single game. It's in a single game.
You're gonna show.
Yes, I'll show some images of it. But also, if you want to make it a Lutron C Touch is one, and also the Lutron Pico 4 button stations are an example. And so then moving on to this. And that's just 2 floors, 2 in the basement, lighting, all these things. Okay.
So would you say that your floor plan is a reflected ceiling plan or not?
You know, you know what it is it's both. It's in between because I have to know the RCP, right? I have to know what's going on in the ceiling and whether I need to worry about it or not. But I often need to know to coordinate the lighting with what's underneath it. So I'm careful not to get too much visual noise on the drawing with stuff that's just gonna make the electricians crazy because they're installing it. And I often will spin off and do a dimensional plan where I mark up dimensions all over it to really show the electricians. But I've also drawn it to scale and where I really want the lights to be versus just some designers they're schematic. They kind of loosely throw the lights in where they think they might go, but they'll coordinate later. And I coordinated right from the get-go. It's just not that hard. Yeah. So lighting fixture schedule. Something else, in addition to the plans, this is something that I have to do. And I was just pouring through the code, and this is that thing where I was just pouring through the codes, and I didn't see, but before in the Title 24 energy codes, they said at the end of the project, the electrician needed to provide a schedule to the homeowners. And I was thinking, and what every bulb was on the project. And I think that's, and I was thinking bulbs, like those are, almost gone, and they don't want us using bulbs. So I think that was eliminated from this latest code that January 1st went into effect, those comments, but you've got to have a fixture schedule. And the fixture schedule is often in commercial, we have it on the drawings. They literally buy from it. Yeah, exactly. Because in residential, it seems to be the dynamic thing. There are the fixtures we know, and then there's the known unknowns, to quote someone, which are the decorative fixtures. They always seem to want to take more time with them. And so I like highlighting those on the fixture schedule, we know that they're coming. And I'm very honest with the contractors that we're gonna be picking those, and right now, we think this is what they cost. A lot of contractors will say, you know, the decoratives are owner furnished contractor install, OFCI. And that's often a good way to work it. They're a very specific kind of thing. They often don't want, they'd rather not even have to handle it, you know, until the day they put it in. So the triage with contractor, general, owner, and myself, that's important to do. But this is an example of a fixture schedule. So the fixture type, what room it's in, a description of it. So just literally what it's there for, the manufacturer, part numbers, finish, how it's mounted, whether it's IC, essentially everything about it. And then any special notes at the end. You just gotta have it. It is. And boy, I watch the contractor's shoulders drop. Usually, once they've got this in the plans, they're really happy. And then I'll show one other thing that I really like to do. I got this done.
His shoulders drop, a southern expression.
It's a good thing. And sleep better at night. And then, I'm gonna jump. There we go. I certainly won't take us through every page of this, but I wanted to show that in addition to the schedule, in addition to the fixture schedule, I do a spec package. And this came from my, Saul and I were talking, this came from my commercial work where it's, section 6500 dot whatever is where where the electrical stuff is and lighting. And it came out of that, but even for residential, I adopted it. And I do notes, all the general notes up front in there that has to do with, typically I'm doing in the spec things about buying it and things they need to be aware of versus build things on the drawings. But sometimes there's some overlap in this. But these are just general notes, verifying mounting connections for the lights, and just to make sure that nothing changed on them. I've had projects I spec one way and I showed up and they were 0 to 10. Or I got a call and it's 0 to 10 volt dimming. And it was like, no one told me, really? Wait, did you change all the lights on the job? I mean, so you can run into some crazy stuff out there.
So that, for example, 0 to 10 would be in the light fixture spec, or, I mean, in the fixture schedule or the spec?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Both, and on the cut sheet. So yes, you can see these are wonderful 174 pages. And this was a house. But so here's where I put the cut sheets when I put them in a binder. I issue everything now digitally. But I often, and I will ask them, I'm happy to deliver or ship you a binder too. And they go, oh, yes, I want one on the job site. At least I want one in the general's office. I want one in the electrical contractor's office. So I've learned that. Get one on the job site, but make them put one in their office. So when they're talking to Bill back at the home office, they can say, this is what I'm looking at here. And he doesn't have to figure out where in the world your spec is on their server, that kind of thing. So I'll print it out, literally white binders with a cover sheet, that kind of thing. But this is what I like to do on cut sheets, which is, exactly what the fixture type is, model and lamp. The distributors love this. They get it. I've told them what we want, not just, it's a halo downlight. Oh, those recessed ones. There it is. That's what it is. It ain't that hard. Just like say what you want them to do and buy. And so every part number. So, note that the fixture needs to be with 2 circuit tracks, and we need 2 neutrals on that track. Depending on the dimming, sometimes we need, if it's 2 circuit, have a dedicated neutral for every circuit.
That right there is a reason to use a lighting design. I mean, my brain is like.
Don't you want to figure out your neutral? Then with it, if it's often if they're hiring me, they have some art or they have something in the house that they really want to kind of bring out. And so I'm often doing accent lighting, and accent lights often have parts and pieces and attachments and accessories and color filters and what kind of color filter and what size and all this stuff. So all of those need to be called out, glare control, that kind of thing. I did just some, I lit Yerba Buena Art Center. We relit the whole exterior of it. And I haven't seen it since the night we focused it. God, I hope it's okay. But the budget was super tight. Blue Cross Blue Shield started underwriting them. And they had ancient hydrel, which were fantastic, old HIDs. The colors were all over the map, all over the buildings. So we were pulling those out. I'm gonna go LED. We had to go LED and wanted to. I would have insisted, but I really wanted to be able to have, they wanted it, Blue Cross Blue Shield wanted it blue. They wanted to paint the building blue with their light. Like now half a dozen other buildings in San Francisco and LA, I just came back from LA. Everybody loves that blue. Well, they wanted it their blue if possible. And so we did some tests outside to show them. But when we finally spec'd the project out, there was no way they could afford on the budget that Blue Cross wanted to give them for 24 very expensive exterior grade light fixtures to be color changing. And what's wonderful about the color changing is you could dial in, millions of colors. You could dial in exactly the color you want. And they last, God knows how long, forever. I mean, a long time. But what we decided to do is we had to go back to old school and use glass lenses on top of LED fixtures. I know. But you've got to, we all have a budget, even big projects, and that was just exterior lighting. There's a budget and you got to work with it. And so we found a great company that made color filters and put them on there and put them outside. But that's a case where it wasn't kind of eccentric art lighting, it was just exterior lights. But increasingly I'm asked to do things with color. It's part of our world now. We print in color with our printers.
I have a kind of a budget question. So I second your commendation of Linear Electric. I've used them. I think they're great. And
Lehner
Linear.
over in Richmond, thank you.
But everybody, Laker Electric no longer does single family home, one light fixture at a time. The other call me is basically they just do big projects like for schools and things.
You can still, they will sell fixtures from various manufacturers. And if you know what you want, you can go there and they'll order it and sell it.
I just did that a week ago.
Really?
He called me and Mr. Lane himself called back. And
Jim,
said,
I gotta call it. I gotta call it.
Because they're off my list. They've been on my list for 25 years.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying.
So you
I'm
can
just
go
saying
there
about
and ask Scott the recommendation and do that.
Scott Freer.
Sounds like no.
Yeah, interesting. Because I've had, this is a local problem, I know, but I've had, I still have home projects going through them with, 20, 30 downlights, something like that.
Well, maybe if it's a big, I was calling for one light fixture. I think
Yeah.
city lights is much more for me. I like city lights. They respond.
Oh, yeah, they're wonderful.
My budget question was, so I had bought from Laner, some LED strips and a transformer, and I wired up in a fixture and an edge room. They're not really cheap. I mean, when I got 16 feet of it and, one of the controllers.
5 meters. Yeah, it's like
I'm
that.
over $700.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
so what I'm getting at is, that kind of light fixture gets very energy efficient, you can control the color quality, you can dim it, it's a nice thing, right? But yet it's a relatively expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, in terms of budget, what does it cost them on these fixtures? Were they high because it's new technology, now they're going down and more prevalent, or?
Here's my experience with them. The first thing I learned with LED technology was whether it's in tape, which it sounded like you were talking about, 16 feet or 5 meters standard roll, and you can order it cut already to whatever else you want to. But 5 meters up. I've said this to many people, you can jump on Amazon.com and $40 you can buy a roll of tape.
Yeah.
It's the Wild West. It is the Wild West.
Yeah.
So you can get, and most often all of these LED engines, even from American companies and European companies, they're being assembled in Asia. And the manufacturing task is they have to bend the LEDs. So they go through and they literally have seas of people sitting there with bins of LEDs. And they test it, that one looks good, they put it in that, test it, that goes there, test it, that goes there. And that's called binning. And they've since developed more robot systems that can also test, but and sensors, but there's still a whole lot of hand binning. So the testing to get good color quality out of a diode equals money.
When you say it's a Wild West, when you go to Amazon, is that partly saying that you just cannot trust what you're gonna get in terms of color quality?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I try to go for the bigger names that I recognize, and even then you don't know.
like, isn't that like anything? And you know, that sure enough, it's gotta be tried and true. You need to be able to count on it. And it's because it can be an inexpensive thing to make. And so companies are just cranking up production. Every day of my life, I get links on LinkedIn with someone, some manufacturer wanting to connect with me who's making LED tape and some LED fixtures. And I have no idea who they are, but they're reaching out. And I mean, there're just that many. It's everywhere. So the wonderful thing is it actually can be inexpensive, but you know, and depending on how you spec it and what it is, but not always. And yeah, doing a bookcase can be a couple $1,000 to do a whole bookcase all the way across. I just did my kitchen under cabinets. I always use LED in them. And I wanted, because you kind of see the underside of some of them a little bit. I wanted a beautiful color quality. I never wanted to do this again, I mean, if I don't have to. And I wanted really slim strips that put out beautiful light quality. So I went with Core Lighting, a company I've known and used a ton of. And I would say it was around $150 or so for, you know, a strip that long, 120, maybe something like that. And then the driver, which is $75 to $100. Driver versus transformer, because it's a transformer, but it's also a driver for the LED light engine because it has to have a solid state intelligence in it to know how to dim it. So in LED world, we tend to say driver and not transformer, but that's also what it's doing. It's converting 120 power into it from a dimmer to 12 volt or 24 volt. And I tend to almost only use 24 volt. The wires are bigger, they're stronger, they're brighter, more reliable. 12 volt can be fine, but it's more unreliable and it can break it.
If you have 200 feet of run, the 12 volt light, what gauge wire are you gonna use?
I never do 12 volt, 200 feet anything.
No, I meant 24.
24 volt. Oh God, you know, I don't spec wire sizes.
I know, I just.
I would regurgitate what the I would say, you should check and see what the manufacturer tells you to run at that distance. You know, it's not that I couldn't know, but it's, oh yeah, no, absolutely. And especially outside stuff. But I've run into, flipping over real quick to performing arts, there's LED tape, oh my God. Every Broadway show, every show you see, there's LED tape all over the place, changing colors and mixing the colors. And it's both wonderful and, you know, visually noisy, but you can use it beautifully. But the one thing I will say is, even with 12 volt in one spool, I designed a show in Marin, and through a 1 5-meter strip that was RGBW, it was red, green, blue, and a warm white. And we bought it discount off Amazon because it was a super tight budget. I thought it was a okay company. It seemed like they had a decent web presence. Let's just say that. They seemed to move some product. And from the beginning of that strip, in the first meter to the last meter, the difference in the color qualities was junk. It was a mess. And that was my last 12 volt project. I said, after this, no more. Just in, you know, that's 16 feet or whatever long, like you said. And it was a mess from one end to the other. Okay, so anyway, cut sheets, just scrolling on down. These are decorated, but anyway, this is just something super important to do, is do all your call outs. I like doing them in red. There's so many menus pop up. Let me go back to this real quick. I'm gonna have to do that. Do it. My screen sharing is still on. There. I'm gonna skip budget for now and just say something. I think we were talking about budget earlier. I do a spreadsheet. I list all the fixtures, and sometimes that budget sheet is by room on a project. So for instance, I had a 3-story house. It was very expensive. It was a remodel in San Francisco. There were a lot of really nice ideas all over it, but it was and the owner had a good budget, but not a huge budget. And we had to be really careful, and he had a lot of ideas. He had great taste in lighting. He was excited to have me there. We did it was a fun time, but we really, oh my God, we beat that budget to death before we finally did the final design and got it out, because he saw exactly how much in each room, what his ideas really would cost. And he said, you know what, let's just allow, even if we haven't picked it, let's allow 500 for that fixture. And that's it. I know what I've got to stick to. Yeah, it was just great. And then we knew the rooms, and he paid for what he wanted. And then we really spent the money where we were always on the same page.
Hey, look,
Yeah,
just FYI, you're doing fine. We have a little less than 20 minutes, so depending on what, I think we want like about 10 minutes of question and answer conversation, something like that. If that-
great. That sounds good. So let's do 10 more and stop. I'm gonna skip some terminology, but I'm gonna do this one.
And then this, I guess, is typically available after the presentation. See the presentation,
I can share the PDF of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and if you ever want to call me to ask what something was on it, please do. I'm here in Berkeley, you can find me on the web. In talking about, there are different kinds of dimmers now. There have been for many years. You won't believe me, I know. It's getting easier. I promise you it is. It's actually, all these different kinds of dimmers all over the place based on what kind of load it was and matching those up. And I can't tell you how many projects I had that had magnetic recessed downlights, and they stuck an electronic dimmer on it, and it was going nuts, and vice versa, and all kinds of stuff. So just so you know what the basic kinds are now, it's really shaken down to about 4 different kinds. There are ELVs, which are electronic low voltage, which are the more modern kind of dimmer. They're really meant for dimming LED loads and some other things that have solid state transformers and things like that in them, and circuits inside them. They're also known as trailing edge. You'll hear that term pop up, trailing edge. And that'll show up on cut sheets on Y Lighting or Lumen or these companies. Any trailing edge dimmer, you go, oh, wait a minute, why didn't you say ELV? So it's a thing to watch out for, or a reverse phase. So what it is, I'll show you what it's doing to the curve for the of dimming down the road. The other type that's been out for many years now are MLVs, magnetic low voltage. And those are meant to control magnetic transformers going to a source, typically a low voltage source. And they're specifically meant to dim that magnetic transformer in a way that it's happy with. I said they play well together. That's all I need to know. It needs to be an MLV for that load type. Load type being that kind of light. Then auto sensing. Here we go. Now we're in the modern world. There are dimmers that are auto sensing, which is great. You spec one kind of dimmer, and based on whatever you need on the design, your dimmable lighted mirror, or your landscape lights, or your recessed lights that are brand new that need ELV, or your old recessed lights that still have MR16s in them, that are halogen. Well, they're not going to be, yeah. And I'm going to beg you to change those bulbs out, but anyway, these dimmers will sense what the load is. And adapt.
Is this at the centralized lighting rack, or is this at an individual?
Two ways. That's an excellent question. It can be done either or both. You can go via your processor, and with the software, your installer will set up what kind of load that dimmer is going to do. I've had to change them sometimes to a different mode, and it dims that load better going to a different mode. These being the different modes of it, whether it's CL type, magnetic, or ELV. But you can do it via software, or the dimmer is self-adaptive. So it will see, and it will make a choice and say, this is what I need to do.
is that only with the auto sensing or just with other dimmers?
The autos,
Okay.
yeah. The others are fixed. That's an ELV or
Okay.
fixed MLV. And then this has been out for since 15 years or more now, CL dimmers. And what they did, they were the dimmer that came in when LEDs first started, and they've continued to make them better. And they're still calling them that, or now they're calling them LED plus dimmers when they'll dim LEDs plus some other things. But the CL dimmers were meant to dim compact fluorescent. If you've got some of those existing, but you want to dim them, try to get them out of there when you can, or they'll dim LEDs. also. And those dimmers are really meant to dim, I call it retrofit bulbs. LED bulbs that you screw into or stick into with bi-pin into older fixtures. And you've dimmed them, you know they work, or you've switched them and you know they work. These dimmers are really meant for more retrofit bulbs going into old fixtures. You'll see you'll run into this, all of your more modern light fixtures take either an ELV or an MLV or an auto sensing dimmer.
You think bulbs are gonna be a thing of the past in the near future?
As best I can tell, yes. Yes, it's both that Mercedes and I have, talked about this a lot of, it's really annoying. There's a planned obsolescence that the manufacturers, I think, this is just me pontificating, but they've understood that it doesn't benefit them to make a fixture that'll last 100 years. And these light bulbs now don't have all the heat. They do have some heat, but they don't have all the heat that we used to have with halogen. Oh my God. So the fixtures aren't going to burn up as often inside. They're not going to fail as often. And they need to get more. Also, there's a better side and a less malicious thing about it, or greedy side, which is they can control to have a more predictable outcome, the quality of that light fixture and its performance, if they can test and manufacture the modules that go in it with it. They can, I know. I'm trying to sort of convince myself too, but no, I get it. But they really do, they spend tons of money testing all these different, we talked about it, all these different diodes and modules, lamp modules to get the right one.
But how do you know if you order something and it's not just how you want it, how you can change it, where with the bulb, oh, I don't like that bulb, I'm gonna get one with a different color, temperature, whatever.
Yep. How do you know? Great question. The manufacturers on the cut sheet, I don't spec anything, I can't get a cut sheet. I mean, I just say that now. I'm very leery of manufacturers that make fixtures without cut sheets. So it tends to be, so any of the decent manufacturers, they'll tell you that fixture or that downlight is made, they make 2,700, 3,000, 3,500.
Sometimes when something's on site that you think you've specified correctly, it doesn't look like what you expected.
Right.
You can't change it.
Right. You most often now you can. And here's how, I'll show you how. There are, the better fixtures, you can pop the modules out of them. So it sort of is a bulb.
It's kind of like a bulb then.
That's it. You got it. It's a more expensive bulb. It's $100. And just when you thought, you thought $25 for a light bulb, and you're gonna tell me it's more expensive than that? These are $100 or 75 or something for the module. There's a whole lot going on in that lamp module to make that at 12.5 watts be as bright as something that used to be 75 or 100. There's a lot of stuff going on to do that. I know everything is getting more expensive, isn't it? But this is really good. I just put some beautiful warm dim, so they dim and change color as you dim them down in my showers and in my downlights in my home. By a great company, and they really worked with me. I had used them elsewhere, but so this module was new to me. Their warm dim module I'd never done. One of them one of the two downlights in the shower and one of my bathrooms went out within a week. And that tends to be what happens with LED. If it fails most of the time. It fails pretty fast. It's a problem, a glitch on the circuit board, somehow in the solder or whatever, boom, it goes down. And fine, they just swapped it right out, done. And that module swaps out, no messing with the pop the trim off, plug the module into the thing, put the trim, I did this, I just didn't want to even bother getting my electrician to come back out for that. My God, he costs more than the module costs, so it's, I just popped the module right in there. It wasn't hard. I looked on a piece of paper. I didn't even have to look it up on a website. And off we went, and it works beautifully. It's nice.
So just to clarify, that was with an example of the fixture where the lamp is quote built in.
Yes, it is. The lamp is built in as a module.
Okay.
Now, let's step back and breathe for a second, because we're going to make ourselves crazy, because now there are those beautiful $5,000 and $7,000 chandeliers on lumens.com, and I've spec'd some of them that are rings of beautiful LED tape and milky white rings. Those are beautiful, and I've done some. And it's a self-contained unit. You would have to send the fixture back to the manufacturer to get it repaired.
I wanted to mention one quick thing is I bought a couple of light fixtures on Etsy that were well listed. And they do have removable lamps there, and we use a CL dimmer, so. It's interesting that there are, to your earlier thing of, are there gonna be none of the bulbs? I bet there, for some of these sort of individual character fixtures that people are producing custom,
Mhm.
they'll still use the bulbs that are not with the module.
Yeah, I'm finding, and honestly. I found some amazing hardware on Etsy. Etsy isn't just a bunch of cheap stuff that people are doing as hobbyists off to the side. It's actually, yeah, there's some, I found some not cast iron, what black iron, hammered iron fence hardware on there from a guy. It's an amazing, I think he's up in Oregon, and that's what he does. He makes hardware. That's one of his avenues to sell his product. And it's beautiful construction, and oh my God, it's something that Rejuvenation would sell, for $500 a hinge or something. And I love that I know who made that. It's like, that's cool. Now let's loop back to light fixtures. Yes, it's really good. You can buy on impulse if you want. You're gonna know when you get it. And so can you return it? What if it doesn't dim well? Can you replace the light in it? It's a trial and error process. It'd be smart to ask the seller, what kind of lamp, or what's the light engine or driver, what's the bulb in it? First, you can still say bulbs or lamps. Remember, in architecture, bulbs are lamps. Yes, I know, exactly. I try to sort of, keep it sort of.
Drop down to.
No, it's for me, I just like that. We grew up saying bulbs for God's sake. But it's in Lumiere, I call them light fixtures, and it's in theater and entertainment, it's light fixtures. But then we call it a fixture schedule versus Lumiere schedule, and it's like, oh. Anyway, yeah, find out what it uses, and then find out if you can have if there's a lamp that you like with it. So that would be my record. How we doing?
It's 6-7 minutes more.
Oh, let's stop and do.
I can agree.
You know what? Yeah, I know, it's so dry.
I want to see one of those lights, it's just a talk shop of those little.
Yes.
Let me go to right.
There you go. So that's the 5, that's what I put it. Actually, that was not intentional, but, so it's over here. And it's really a one game, it's kind of Viva series or, standard designer Decora wall plate size. And it's 5 buttons and a raise and lower at the bottom. And I always make the bottom button off. That's kind of seems to be an industry standard. And and this is actually in their Radio Raw line that they have. This is Lutron. And
So what are the 2 buttons on the bottom with the other 4 or 5?
they have a little arrow on them, and they're raise and lower. So one side raises.
Like the slider.
Yes, exactly. So I preset my scenes in those, scenes, that I want in the room. And you do that by setting your dimmer, you hold the button, go to button 1, set the dimmers to the level you want. And in this case, this has software that runs on the
Now,
laptop.
this is for 1 or 5 fixtures.
Oh, okay. 100.
No, for this one right here.
So imagine this. It's by looks. So button 1 could have 5, 10, 100 dimmers on it.
100 different fixtures.
100 different fixtures, whatever you want to put on. Now, and I want to encourage that. Don't think this has to be so complicated. Again, the dining room, like I pinned it over the table. I can't emphasize enough, separate your lighting ideas, right? So that your pendants and your decorative fixtures are separate from your tasks, are separate from your under cabinet.
Meaning in terms of switching?
Separate dimmers, switching,
Yeah.
separate switching / dimmers. And I dim anything that I can get a dimmer at, I dim it, right? Because I want to control it for look. And you're saving energy, there's nothing bad about it. So what's great is, again, that top button, I tend to make that top button my really bright. Then I tend to use the next button down as the medium.
This would be for like 1 room.
Yeah,
Just one.
absolutely. And
Not
I,
using that for other fixtures that
My-
you cannot see. or-
Right. yeah, it's right, except that in my back hallway, it's a wall switch. That has looks, and then it can also be a switch. I've set in my back hallway, I've got. Outside lights at a bright look, and the next one down is a lower level outside look. And then those next three are three different sides of the house toggling on or off.
And you have three-way switch capability.
And that, yes, absolutely, you can with these. Yeah, so for instance, my kitchen has, listen, so you come into it, there's one on the right, there's one over at the sink there. There's one on the far end of the kitchen, it's a galley one, kind of galley kitchen. There's one over at my wife's desk, so that's 1, 2, 3. And there's a fourth over at a little, I have a tiny little bar area / prep cook area about this big. And it's a bungalow, so it's small, but and I wanted one at the bar, so because often I would come in to make drinks or make, food orders for people and go outside. And I wanted to be able to then turn the kitchen down low there. So wherever you want one to control it, you're there. And it's not looping between necessarily, they're all home runs with 120-volt power. All they need is power. That's it. They just go to the box. That's it. And, okay, so that's an example of those.
So that means that programming this. At your kitchen, when it first come in, that's switch number 1, that's number 2, number 3, number 4, and back in your control panel, that's where it's identifying one.
Yeah,
You're saving the
you're
settings locally here.
you save the settings using a laptop, you save them into the processor. Processor has the brain, and then it stores it. And literally you can lose power. And when the power comes, everyone says, well, what happens if I lose power? If you lose power, you lost power, unless you've got a battery, a solar system with batteries, right? So, but when it comes back up, it's all there, it's all stored. And I think EEPROM, something like that, inside of it. Let's do some questions. Any other?
Well, this is kind of a question comment, so in terms of the keypad, one thing that I like is that it allowed us to do some essentially three-way switching without having to read through the wiring. I thought that was really cool,
That's-
especially when you're having to dig into the plaster
Yep,
to wire it,
especially in a remodel. Let me,
Yeah,
if I can elaborate on that. The system she's talking about is the entry level Lutron Cassetta is what it's called. And God, it's easy to set up. And they bought I believe it was an English company or something to do it, but it's called Cassetta. Oh, you know what I hate most in the world, I think I could honestly say, is those mechanical time clocks or digital time clocks on the wall. And a single gang with 2 AA batteries in it or AAA batteries in it. And then they get out of sync and it's switching. Oh my gosh. And I've built computers and I can't program all those things. I have no idea what to do with those little things. And they always screw up. Well, Cassetta has wiped that out and made it so easy to comply with Title 24's. All your exterior lights need to be on some kind of controllable time. And I love doing that anyway. I just like sitting outside the driveway turns on at a certain time and the back door light for when myself or my family come home. That the front porch, the steps, and the back door and the driveway are lit. And clearly, and I can see. So honestly, from a safety standpoint, that's great. Well, there's no way in the world I would have had. I used to have one at the back door, one at the front that turned the porch lights on and off, right? But they would always get out of sync. The Lutron Cassetta system, what you do is there's a dimmer, those kinds of, not this, there are those kinds of dimmers. You figure out what your dimmer load is. You have a dimmer for each one. And it can be local, or you can just pile them all together in a laundry closet somewhere or in a storage room somewhere, and then just run them out, out to it. But it goes power, dimmer, load, right?
Yeah, dimmers on the outside.
I
I know you like dimmers, but I mean.
Yeah, so the dimmers are on the inside,
I understand.
lights are on.
Why you
Why
need
they
it.
do.
Why do they need to be dim? Because how many times have you driven down the road and you saw someone's porch light and they had one of those 5,000 K bulbs and blue-white bulbs and it looked awful blasting around? Or they had, for my driveway lights, I light the heck out of it. There's 3 different double head lights down the driveway. But I don't want those at full blasting my neighbor in the face and everything else, or just bouncing up and having a wall of light. So for distribution, I needed more than one fixture to go all the way down the driveway. But I want to balance and control the light. I don't want to just slam it on. There's a green side to me that I want to be able to control. Every time you're dimming it, you're saving energy. And it isn't so easy. Easier said than done. That they make them in 5 different options, 25, 75, they don't. They make one fixture and then,
That's a good reason.
yeah, no, it's an interesting point to bring up. It's the same with landscape lighting. And in theme park, I'll get back to you, I promise. Same with, in theme park lighting, I got used to, and God, they hated, the maintenance of it all. It's such a big area. They hated dimming anything. Something you'll start to see now is, so the landscape community, also just the outdoor, the wear and tear on exterior fixtures can be ugly. And so a dimmer on that, it could then short out and all this other stuff. What they started, now the manufacturers are doing is you send 12 volts out to the landscape lights. They're 12 volt on a big, strong cable, as many of you probably know. But at the light fixture, they have different modes, and you use a magnet that they provide you. You touch the side of the light, high, medium, low.
And it stays there.
Cool.
Then it's just turn it on, turn it off, call it a day. And you set the level you want. Yes, and let's see, oh God, not Hinkley maybe does them, but it was the guy in the Midwest that said, oh, you Californians always wanting to dim your lights. Those landscape lights. I was like, hey. But they make some Hinkley, I was thinking it was Hinkley, they make some beautiful lights.
And then once you set it to that dim level, I'm sorry.
Right.
It's set. You're not gonna change it.
Right, no, right, exactly, yeah. I just hate when you've got one kind of light on the tree uplights and it's light pollution, so you want to be careful how much uplighting you do, but a little bit of it's beautiful and you want to be careful. Don't use more than you need, that's a reason. Yeah,
California 22 code, does that change what you can do and how you do things?
24 or 20,
22, the ones that came into effect this January.
yeah, boy,
22, yes.
yeah, at the end of this list, I bullet pointed some stuff I saw that are so far the changes. Mostly, I don't think I saw anything that I haven't already been doing, was my takeaway from it, from a lighting standpoint, and especially from a residential lighting standpoint. And let's do the turbo quick bullet point of it is all the sources are high efficacy. I'm doing all LED anyway. It's unconscionable to stick halogen in there. And I come from a world of halogen and performing arts, but there's no reason not to, as long as you just buy good quality LED. They're out there. Philips, GE, Sora is a company I love, SORAA. I love their bulbs. And these are bulbs that go in things.
How about FEIT?
They're kind of the big 500-pound gorilla. I confess, they've made lamps on things that others didn't make an LED replacement. And I use them and they've been okay. I used to not like them and felt like what they would do is they would kind of knock it off GE and Philips for a cheaper price tag. And they were a company that would come into large corporations and do group relamping. And so they were just making a cheaper mousetrap that wasn't as good. But they're starting to make, they've matched with was it GE Reveal, I think did a nicer color quality line. And then boom, right beside it at Ace Hardware were the Fate lamps.
So you think Philips is the top? Is that?
I wouldn't call them the top, they do some beautiful stuff. And then they've done some other stuff that's tricky. The thing you run into is I have to specify on projects things that comply with code. But I have had projects that I know the lamp would, something I like in this new code you just asked, there's a section down there that says, and the wording is a little weird, but it says, if you have a high efficacy lamp, it's high efficiency LED. It says that right on it. And it's, so they say that, and then it will meet JA8, the code regulations for Cal. And that's like, oh, thank you guys. It's like, finally, I had a project 5 years ago in Berkeley, an amazing arts and crafts home that had a great room. It was close to the size of this room from about here. And it had 4 beautiful black iron sconces on each wall, like that, with 2 candelabras on each one. So 4, so 8, 16 of those. And they were starting, the wiring had rotted, they were starting to short out. But it was, I mean, hand painted ceilings. It was a beautiful room and they were refurbishing everything and keeping it really nice. We wanted to keep those sconces. So I got the company on Solano Avenue to rewire the sconces. Ensler, that's what it was. And those guys are great. And he's been there forever. And I think he wants to retire, please tell him. But I found some LED lamps that were warmed in by Philips, and I was like, oh, they fitted it, and I was like, oh man, that's what this needs, is to dim it down. But they were not JA8 certified yet. And this was for a homeowner.
So you put the ones that are certified in, and then after the inspection, you put the good ones in.
Well, this was one that
Inspectors don't.
Yeah, and what we did, so I had an assistant in New York, he bought them, shipped them to me, we stuck them in, they're gorgeous, they're super energy efficient. I know now that they would comply with JA8, no problem. And they're beautiful color quality. And that was so satisfying that oh God, versus I think they had 2 60s in each one. And we went to like 5s, 2 5s or 2 6 7s. Or some, maybe less in each one, 4s maybe.
Well, great, we should probably wrap up. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks you guys.